All right. Well, speaking of the Americans, we got our guest in studio. I like it when guests are in studio. We were talking a bit about that before. It makes the conversation easier. This is Paul McGregor of America Fund, and you're going to talk a bit about your organization and the concept. You know, as we said, 15 minutes isn't long enough, but we're gonna cover a bit of this in the America 51st. So welcome to the studio, and thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Corey. I appreciate you having us on. So, we did talk a little bit before. So, to explain a little bit about America Fund and some of the history and the kind of the group. So, it is a group of small businessmen who've gotten together and said, look, we want to take a look at this issue of statehood from a professional point of view. Right, and get and bring in lawyers and bring in all of the specialists to look at this type of stuff. So there's a little bit of history with, of course, the two spokespeople at this point in time is myself, and I am and was the president of AB 51 project, which was a few years ago. And the primary focus of AB 51 project was to look at the Constitution for Alberta. Right, give us some real details about what it could be and what it should be, and we brought in a whole group of people and a lot of very very intelligent and well educated people to look at that. So we've already got the basis for that. America Fund, of course, the other spokesperson is Peter Downing. So Peter and I, a little while back, and some other businessmen as well, we came together and partnered with America Fund as the mechanism by which we could fund, do the things that need to be done for AB 51 as a concept, right? Now, so that's a little bit about the group. And its focus is to educate people and say, look, there is a path. This is a good thing for Alberta. Financially, economically, for our children, our grandchildren, this is a good thing, and really, in our view, really the only way to go forward, considering current geopolitical and geoeconomical circumstances. That, look, we need to have a path to protect Albertans and Western Canadians as a whole, and give us something solid that we can actually that's been well thought out. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, so this concept's been around for quite a while. Yeah. We were talking earlier. I was working with Patrick Beauchamp, over
That's right.
25 years ago, and he was trying to promote it. It was difficult to get that concept out there, and that's where you're saying it's an educational concept. But it really has re-emerged on the scene. I don't know if it's taking widespread support on the ground, but people are talking about it more than ever, thanks to President Trump repeatedly mentioning that. Though he's been talking about the whole country as a 51.
So we've been looking at this a long time. Mm-hmm. We don't see it as a whole country thing. Now, okay. Economically, Canada's got a problem. Its governance is a problem. Everybody knows this. I mean, the Canadian system is broken. It's not fixable. A new leader goes in, same problems. It's already, and we were talking about this, Senate's already predetermined. Judiciary's all predetermined. A Bill of Rights ain't worth the paper it's written on. Trucker convoy prove that. So the system's got a problem, and we need to really change that. But what we're interested in is dealing with Western Canada as a group, and like you've said, Corey, the separation thing is nothing new. It's just which direction do we go kind of deal, right? So right now, what happens is in crisis, people change. People want change. We're very excited. We see the best is yet to come, to be honest. There's two ways to look at a crisis, and anybody who's ever been successful in business or in investments, you look at a crisis, you can be scared, you can run, you can get out, and of course you lose, right? Or you can see it as an opportunity. And this is an opportunity for Alberta and Albertans to take control of their own governance and their future for themselves and their children.
So with this, I mean, that's part of it. Right now is at the educational point. You're kind of taking advantage of that. You've been at it for a long time, but now it's in the scroll, it's in the news. People are looking at it. So you want to now, I mean, your perspective is you want them to come out of it with a positive view on the concept.
Yes.
what kind of steps do you start working from there when you go beyond the educational? Like, what are the mechanisms? That's where it gets a little complicated.
And it does, and there's a lot of moving parts to that, as I said earlier. There's a lot of moving parts. Obviously, we need to look at, and we are working in this in the background. We need to look at the partnerships with businesses, Congress, Senate in the U.S. We need to look at the Constitution for Alberta and come up with something that is a viable path to be able to do this. Now, before, as you said, this has been talked about, but there was no path. Everybody's like, well, that's great, Paul, or whoever the spokesperson was at the time. And but how do we actually do this? I mean, Clarity Act, forget about it. Right, you got 51%. It's got to go to the Parliament. 3/4 of the Parliament have to agree. It's never going to happen. It's set up for a failure. But now that we have an American protectorate and an offer that says, okay, you know what, guys, you can come in to the mansion at this point in time. We have a lot going on economically in Canada, and with foreign nations and foreign interference. That's all over the news. I won't get into the weeds of that, but I mean, really, just look at what's going on. So having that offer and the ability to work with these people. So in the background, to answer your question, we're working with individuals at high levels to be able to work out the details. We've got a constitutional basis. We're going to be releasing all that information. And what's interesting about that, Corey, is it gives the Western provinces the chance to have a say in how that looks. There's so many wonderful constitutions out there. And we talk, I mean, I'm Treaty Indian as well. So when we talk about for Indian nations, I mean, they're going to have way more than they would in Canada, 100% resource ownership. And it's the same thing with the state. The state has that. The government can't dictate your economic decisions. We can't have a Japan losing $1 trillion deal on LNG in Alberta because the Eastern Canada, the Laurentian elites say, no, we don't want you to have that over there. And so guess who's getting it now? The U.S., right? They're looking at it. What could that have done for our people, right? So those are the things we're looking at.
Yeah, well, the economic case is very solid, though it still needs to be
Yeah.
expanded and made to people because they don't necessarily understand that.
Yeah.
At some point, though, you have to approach the political class. Like we
Yes.
have a broken system, but we have a mechanism we are within, and
Yes.
and people will expect that we're going to need some elected support at some
Absolutely.
point. So now we start talking to you, looking at should federal parties become engaged, provincial parties.
So
existing parties take
personally,
on the
I
council.
don't believe the federal option is an option because you're working in a system that's already broken to begin with. So how do you do that? I think more on the provincial side and working with premiers and so on and so forth that will look at this. The people need the option. Right now we have this, excuse me for saying, fake Team Canada thing that really is not looking at the interests of individual provinces. They're looking at a governmental system and maintaining that. We have Pierre Poilievre, former Stephen Harper. Love these guys. Okay, that's not the issue there, but their response was that Canadians should have any amount of suffering to maintain the name. This is just a fake line where that creates this whole country. And what we need to do is look at our own areas and our own people and have our leaders like Premier Smith and so on and so forth. And I realize that they have their own supporters and their own viewpoints, so on and so forth. But people need to have it as an option, Corey, that they say, look, here's the option, here's Canada, it's like I was saying when my kids were young and they needed to make a big decision. I'd say, look, get out of the emotions. Let's put the pros and cons down, right? And let's see what's good for our future. it's not about how I feel about it particularly, and I'm not ignoring or throwing out the emotions. There is an emotional sense to this, but for us, we're Albertans first, we're Westerners first, and because that's our home, that's our backyard, that's my living room we're talking about here, and so that's what's important. And I think the governments, yes, we have to approach them, and I think we're ready and to talk to them and to say, look, guys, you need to present an option to the people and stop the fear-mongering, because the fear-mongering isn't going to do anything but make everybody weak. And that's a problem.
So the discussion's been brought out for President Trump. He's brought a lot of discussions out.
Yeah.
I wonder how much necessarily... It's interesting to watch. I mean, I've been observing. So to some degree, I think it's kind of galvanized a sense of patriotism among Albertans, even within Canada. As you said, there's some of that Team Canada, whether it's misgiven. I mean, I think some of it, as you say, it's strategic on Trump's part.
Yes.
But when one of an analogy I use in a sense is, Alberta and the rest of Canada, or Alberta, Eastern Canada, have been like in a domestic dispute and squabbling for a long time. Yeah. But you got to watch it when you step in between a couple that's having a domestic dispute, because you could find both of them turning on you.
Yeah.
And, say, hey, I can't stand that one, but this isn't your business. Let us sort this out, and then we'll talk with you. I'm just saying that it's brought the discussion up, but I think it might have made some people dig their heels in.
Sure, and you know what? Look, controversy brings a conversation. We were saying that. At least the conversation's happening, and once all the emotions settle down, and the crises builds, unfortunately, what's happened with the Team Canada approach is to counter tariff, and I said this before, everybody talks about, Trump came in and just tariffed us and it's a terrible thing that he's done. Well, wait a second. We've been tariffing the U.S. for years, and forget about 25%, 200, 250%. You can't even buy cheese and get across the border, without having a massive tariff. I had one border agent say, and I have wide latitude, I can charge up to 400% tariffs on it. None of that's been mentioned. It's all like a military takeover in the sense of that's the emotion. But what are we protecting? We're protecting carbon tax. We're protecting this relationship that has basically said Alberta has only one purpose, which is, since its inception, Clifford Sifton said the purpose of the West was to enrich Canada, and at that time Canada was Upper and Lower Canada, as you know, and that was its purpose. Nothing's changed. 1980s, we had the national energy. Now we've got Trudeau. We have a system that says you're not equal. So how long? It's like the Declaration of Independence said. How long do we need to? And I'm beating this up and paraphrasing it. I could look at it, but how long do those ties have to last? Forever and ever? Or do we look at it at the situation right now, and as parents, as grandparents, make the choice, business people make the choice and say, hey, we got to look at the pros and cons in this. And I think as a government, governing people, not ruling them, saying, listen, this is the only option, and if you don't do this, the whole world's going to fall apart. This whole Chicken Little thing that the media, paid for by Trudeau, by the way, right? So, I mean, it's laughable. Everything that they're saying, Canada as a group could have existed, but the trucker convoy, I think, was the end of that. Basically, it was alienate everybody else. We're the ruling class. This is a neo-feudal system. You are subjects. You will comply. We'll take we'll put you in jail. We'll take your money. We'll freeze your accounts. Peaceful Canadians wanted to say, we wanted a say. You do not have a say. We never have had a say. So we need a say right now. We need the premiers of the Western provinces to say, okay, guys, there is two options to this. And let people present it. Let's have that conversation. Get away from the fear-mongering.
Yeah. Well, we knew the conversation would go fast, so before I start rapping with you.
Is that all it?
We're not out yet, but before I let you go, and are there plans maybe for events or gatherings or things like that?
Yeah. So we are planning constitutional events. The summertime is better for that kind of stuff. Of course, in the wintertime it's a bit tough. There's nothing right now as in a date made up. Again, a lot of this is funding stuff and so on and so forth, right? So we're working through the details, and Peter and the group have had those conversations so that we can present this information. So yes, and that will come out, and we'll release it as we go, Corey, on the X sites and websites and TikTok and that kind of thing.
Great. Well, and before I let you go then, so if people want to get involved or if they want to find out more, as I said, we just kind of scratched the tip of the iceberg of the concept here today. Where can they find more information?
Well, right now, the websites need some work. I'll admit that, okay? But as far as the best places, I think John is going to put them up, has put them up already. Yeah. There is X. And the main site you're going to find the information is Real America Fund. There's a realamericafund.ca, which is the web, at Real America Fund on X. There's at Alberta Projects on X, and on TikTok at Alberta 51 Project, I believe. He's got it up there. I can't even remember it myself. I wrote it down earlier. So that's the primary places right now.
Great. An easiest spot typically for people to find things now anyway is just Google Real America Fund, and I'm sure it's going to point to that site. And we can find out more. Well, thanks for coming in and talk to us about it. And you got your work cut out, but we're in for some really interesting and as I said, tumultuous times. And there's no better time to start discussing these things than now. If nothing else, it's the conversation of the day. So I appreciate you sharing it with us, and we'll be watching closely to see how it goes.
Thank you. And the best is yet to come.
Great. Thanks,
Let's
Paul.
believe in. Thank you.
All right. So one more time, that was Paul McGregor of the America Fund, or as we said, look for realamericafund.ca, and you'll be able to find them and get some more information. It's kind of an irony that there's a .ca on it, isn't it? But I mean, that's part of getting your websites and SEO things. And as I said, this has been around a long time. Pat Beauchamp and I worked on stuff, working on that concept 25 years ago. It hasn't gained a lot of traction, but the discussion sure has fallen onto our lap now, regardless, hasn't it? And people are discussing it, people are considering it. I see some of the commenters saying, they prefer the independence option and just, absolutely. I mean, that's kind of where I sit with it, but the discussion's there. And maybe farther down, I mean, who knows? Or prior to independence, maybe it's straight to the States. But we have hit a turning point, I think, as a nation. It's a mess. And it's ironic. I think whether it was intentional or not, one of the things that Pierre Poilievre was saying a lot is, pre-campaigning, I guess, and over the time, was that Canada is broken. It was a statement he used a lot. Canada is broken. Canada is broken. Watch, he's going to stop using that. He already has stopped using that. In fact, the legacy media and the usual suspects in Eastern Canada are pressuring and watching for whenever he says this. They say, you're a disloyal man saying that. Well, no, it doesn't matter. If it's broken, it's not a matter of loyalty to point out it's broken. But he's going to back off on that. That's some of the, I think, unintended consequences. I don't know. Nobody could read Trump's mind. I'm not sure if Trump could read Trump's mind, but it's hard to tell where he's coming from. But what I see to a degree, again, you see, is it actually tamped down a bit of discussions now. And now it is this Team Canada thing, so it's actually united a lot of people more. Though others, like Paul and other independence-minded people, it's brought the conversation into the forefront, where now they're starting to scratch their heads. Well, let's talk about this a little bit. We weren't even talking about it before. You got to start discussing it. I mean, there are a lot of valid points to be made. If you're going to compare constitutions, if you want to compare GDP per capita, you want to compare the tax base, you want to compare the market access, well, there's a heck of a big case to be made that Alberta would look a lot better as a state than as a province. Now, whether it's a independent province would be better or worse, again, it's a long, huge discussion. The other bigger aspect, as we said, so what Paul was saying, he's just looking at Alberta and maybe Saskatchewan in the 51, but when you talk about the whole Canada as a 51, and that's Trump really poking things, there's really no interest across the country for that. And there's a question of how much interest there is on the Americans' part for that, particularly Republican ones. And let's face it, even if Alberta, which is the most conservative province in the country for the most part, though Saskatchewan has fewer Liberal MPs right now, but even if Alberta joined the United States, I could see Alberta being a swing province. It could be a Democrat province. And suddenly they've got an electoral college that's changed, and now you're starting to see more Democrat governments coming in. I'm not sure every Republican wants to see that. Either way, the discussion's there, and discussion is always good. I do like seeing things stirred up. I mean, we can stir things up and come out worse than we went in, or we can come out with something better, and we'll see if something better comes out of this. This is